Really quick and simple video today, guys, on how to change a tip on your pool or snooker cue. If I can do this, then honestly anyone can, and it's just a case of having the right equipment and doing the right things. If you do that, then it's a really simple process. And watch out for my tip on something that I do that is quite unique and probably quite controversial, but there is a very good reason I do it. So we start just by removing the old tip, and you want to get a really sharp knife to do this and try and clean as much of the tip off the ferrule as possible in one go. Once you've done that, get a bit of sandpaper and sand the top of the ferrule. You want to get all the residue of the glue and old tip off there. You want it as clean as possible, as that will make the next tip stick better. Now normally I use a rasp, believe it or not, for doing this rather than sandpaper, just because it means that I can keep it level, and it means that you're not getting a bit of a dome in your ferrule, which will mean that part of the tip is stuck to it and part of it isn't. But a bit of laziness today, my house is in a bit of disarray, my toolbox is away, so I'm just using what is to hand, and that is a bit of sandpaper. Once you've got that all nice and clean, then it's time to prepare your tip. When you first get them, they've got a bit of a shine on the bottom of them. So what you want to do is get a bit of rough sandpaper and lie it on a flat surface. Then if you take your tip just in 2 fingers and run it in circles or a figure of 8 round the sandpaper, and this just takes this shiny bit off the bottom of it and will help it stick to your ferrule much better. Next, it's a good idea just to put a bit of masking tape around your ferrule. It keeps it nice and clean from the glue that you're about to put on, and also when you're sanding it, there will be a lot of dust comes off the tip as well. So do that, and then I'm actually using super glue liquid here, which isn't my normal choice. I would always recommend using a gel rather than a liquid, but unfortunately I live in a house full of women who have got no respect for other people's stuff, and they've stolen my gel, so I'm using liquid just in this instance. But the liquid can seep into the tip, making it a bit harder, so it's always good to use gel. What I do is I put it on the ferrule, leave it on for a little bit of a second, just till it goes a little bit sticky, and then I put a tip on top of it. Now, I probably should say at this point that it's a good idea to get a tip that is bigger than your ferrule. Back in the day, you know, everyone had a fairly uniform cue. It was either 8, 9, 10, 11 millimeters, whatever it was, and you just bought the tip to size. You get a whole range of sizes of ferrules now, so it's always a good idea to buy a tip that is slightly bigger, and then you can trim it down. So just hold the tip down with your fingers just for 10-15 seconds, just to give it a bit of bite, and then after that, it's a good idea to turn the cue upside down and put your tip on a hard surface and just apply a bit of pressure for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. And that's all it takes, really. You should have really good grip after that. But what I normally do is I will set it aside for at least 15 minutes. I wouldn't go back to any sooner than that, but 15 minutes is fine for the next part. If you want to leave it on longer, then that's absolutely fine too. And now for the controversial part. When it comes to trimming your tip to size, what a lot of people do will take the likes of their chopping board, they'll turn their cue upside down and put the bottom of the tip, or sorry, the top of the tip on the chopping board. They'll get their really sharp knife again, and then they'll slice away little edges using the ferrule as a guide. And they'll do that all the way around the tip until it is trimmed to size. Now, the main reason I don't do that is because I think you're putting downward pressure on the tip, so you're almost pushing it away from the ferrule. So I think that you can loosen it a little bit. But the other thing is that by doing that, you will create jaggy edges round the side that you then need to buff out with sandpaper. So what I do is I've actually bought a large pencil sharpener, and if you keep your masking tape on the tip at this point, you can trim your tip with the sharpener, and the masking tape will protect the ferrule from it being accidentally scored as well. I find this is a really neat way to do it. It doesn't create any pressure on the tip. It gives you a really, really good finish. You know, it's flush with ferrule, but also there's hardly any work to do after it in terms of trying to buff out all those sharp edges. So that is my big tip when it comes to this, is use a big pencil sharpener. Once that's done, then it's time to shape your tip. So I start with 120 sandpaper, and I shape it with this. The 120 really gets into the tip. It will shape it really, really quickly. I probably wouldn't use any coarser sandpaper than that. It does it very, very quickly. And what you want to concentrate on is doing downward strokes all the time. You don't want to go down then up, because you will just rip all the fibres off the tip. And you will notice with the 120 that you start to see some fibres coming off the tip anyway. But downward motion, keep twirling your cue as you do it, and this will give you a nice uniform kind of finish all the way around the tip. I also like to do, I kind of turn my hand around, and I do this kind of across the tip movement. I'm not really hitting the top of the tip, I'm just hitting the edges, and I find that rounds it far better for me. I can't explain what exactly it is that I'm doing, or where I learned that. Just kind of learned it, but it works really well. I think it gives a really, really rounded finish. Then move on to about a 300 grit. And what this does is it takes some of the fibres off, so all those little fibres that you tore up with the coarser sandpaper, it takes them up while just, fine tuning that finish. And then I'll finish up with a 600 grit just to take everything out, make it nice and smooth, and it really gives a good finish. Now, if you've decided to trim your tip with a knife and you've got those little jagged edges, what I would do next is you cut a little strip of sandpaper, almost the size of your tip, and if you kind of use your finger to flick that and keep twirling your cue at the same time, that will give you a nice smooth finish round the edges. We don't need to do that here, as we've already got a good finish. So the next part that I do, and another little trick, not many people do this, but you've probably seen now that you can buy burnishing tools online, and they'll cost a minimum of £10. An old trick that shows a misspent childhood is that you can get the same effect just by using a beer mat. Now, what burnishing is it's basically the art of polishing leather, and as you polish leather, it hardens it up. So when you're doing it in a pool tip, there's a couple of things it does. By polishing the edge, you create this black sheen. Now, some people just like that. It's aesthetically pleasing. It gives a nice contrast with when they put the chalk just on the top of their tip. But the more important thing that it does is that by polishing leather, it hardens it up. It helps keep your tip in better shape. So as you start to play with it, especially a new tip, once you start hitting the ball, you're going to squash that tip. You're going to condense it, and it's going to move out of shape pretty quickly. Burnishing it stops that from happening, and you can do it really, really easily with a beer mat. Simply just rub it up and down and across the way as hard as you can, just on the edge, and you'll see it harden up, and it looks really cool. Another little optional part here is to take some steel wool at this point and just rub it up and down your ferrule. The steel wool isn't as abrasive as sandpaper, and it'll give a really nice finish to your ferrule. It'll make it all nice and shiny. If there's any glue marks on there, then it'll take it out, and chalk marks as you've cleaned your shaped your tip as well. Also, you can use it on the top of your shaft. Again, like I said, it's not as abrasive as sandpaper, so it'll just take all the kind of oil marks from your hand and make it nice and clean. Next part is just it's optional. So every tip you need to play in. When you first go and hit a shot, you'll probably feel that your first shot is a little bit spongy feeling, and that's whether you've got a hard tip or not, because the previous tip that you've played with for a while, you've got used to it, you've condensed it, and it's hardened up. You need to do the same with this tip. Now, you can quicken that process by tapping it with a cue ball. Hit it fairly hard against that hard surface, and this will help condense your tip down a little bit. But other than that, it's then just a case of loading up with chalk. You need to put lots of chalk on it to start with, and then start playing with it and enjoy the fun.